Hey there, super friends. It's Joey with Last Point Gaming. Today is Tuesday, October 19th, 2021. How y'all doing? I know I did the big ranty episode about the whole Judge Academy thing and then didn't record last week. Oh well, here we are. So I'm going to talk about EventLink today, some changes we've gotten, something I was quite wrong about, and things we learned using it to run a competitive REL event, and then if there's time at the end, we're gonna talk a little more about these Judge Academy changes. I just be forewarned, look for that to be a frequent kind of filler topic as I come across new information or discussions where people are trying to validate this kind of thing, and my thoughts on it. And I'm not attacking anybody. I'm not like, oh, your opinion's different than mine, so clearly you're wrong and I hate you. No, just I would really like to find somebody who, has a defense for them that I actually see and I go, oh, you know what? Yeah, that does make sense. Okay. But so far, really just looks like a profit grab. Well, it always has. Anyway, we're not going to talk about that yet. First, we're going to talk about EventLink. Don't get me distracted. It's rude. Alright. So, the 48-player cap I've been bitching about, yeah, apparently that's not a thing. Boss overheard MacGyver and I talking one night. We're going to call his brother Murdoch, because I usually try to keep the monikers clustered. And Murdoch's literally the only other name I can remember from that show. I know he's a bad guy on that show, but he was also, the coolest member of the A-Team, so, yeah, I don't know, take your pick. Anyway, Murdoch's been running, 1Ks and stuff out at Owl Central, and was saying he was getting 50 plus players, and MacGyver was like, how are you running with 50 players when EventLink caps at 48? And Boss overheard us talking and was like, EventLink doesn't cap at 48, that's the cap I put in for our events. Oh, okay. And I was like, alright, but why 48, man? Such a weird number. And he's like, Joey, we have 24 tables. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. So, yeah, there is a cap to the players in EventLink, but I think he had mentioned that he saw something about their latest update has increased the cap. It's somewhere around 500, it's a little over 500. We've gotten a lot of improvements that I'm going to talk about. There's still some quality of life things I'd like to see, but we are at the point where for small store tournaments, I think it's actually better than the were. I think we've crossed that threshold where it is at least as functional as the were with potential upside. Except for the fact that we don't have a two-headed giant format. But that's really all that we're missing as far as formats. But I still don't think I would want to use this to run a 500-person event. You can do the paper match slips and everything. Yeah, so I guess maybe it's actually not that it would be that difficult to use it for a 500-person event. maybe just the idea of running a 500-person event, like, scares the piss out of me, and that's why I'm like, yeah, no, I wouldn't want to use it. 'Cause I don't think I'd want to use the word for that either, honestly. Anyway, moving right along. Alright, so things we wanted that we got. They have improved the UI on the mobile phone form factor. The one, like, all the side stuff now collapses and is in a hamburger menu. So, that is awesome. It's still, like, entering results on the phone is still kind of rough. But the drop boxes are more accessible now. And you can, of course, do all of this on a larger screen, so it's not like a showstopper issue. It's just, it's very convenient to be able to do a lot of the administrative stuff just from my phone. That, like, when somebody is looking at me and I can verify their name and I can verify, like, what table they were at and everything, and, like, there's not really a chance for things to get lost or for me to wander off and completely forget about it. It's nice. They have given us the ability to sort players that are enrolled in the event by first or last name, ascending or descending. So that's nice. It would be nice to be able to sort the players in the lobby. So they don't separate the columns in the lobby like they do once you're enrolled. So even if you could just do it by first name, it'd still be nice. But it's not a huge deal. Like, I can live without that pretty easily. I would like the ability to drop people from the lobby. So currently, if you have a player enrolled that joined through the app, and then you drop them, like you remove them during registration, they get popped back into the lobby, which I actually really like. So you don't end up with a situation where, like, you misclick, like you're trying to assign a table number or you're trying to drop somebody else and you misclick, click the wrong drop, and then you have to go have that person re-enter the code or get their arena email address or whatever. Like, and it's basically you have to go admit to somebody that you've screwed up. So I do like that feature. It would just be nice if we could drop out of the lobby. This is really something that only has a real risk of coming up, aside from, like, real weird things like, oh yeah, I put the code in and everything I was going to play, and then I suddenly got a call before round 1 saying I have to go. The only time I think we have a risk of this happening, and I mean, it's on us, we can be more careful in administration, is on pre-release weekends where we run 2 events a day. So if the wrong code gets put up, and that's actually what happened at the Midnight Hunt Two-Headed Giant pre-release, Saturday and Sunday pre-release weekends, we do 1 o'clock Two-Headed Giant, 5:30 solo sealed. And I was running late, so, you know, boss went and put the code up and everything. But when he entered the events, he must have, like, entered the second event for, like, 5:30 a.m. because it showed up, like, before the 1 o'clock event, like, higher up in the list on the calendar. And that's the code he put up. And when I had gotten there, you know, I was standing outside smoking a cigarette, I logged in on my phone, got the event code for the Two-Headed Giant event, just because it shows the event title. So, it's the only reason this, like, matters at all. So, you know, I went into the Two-Headed Giant event specifically, got the code, put it in my phone, and when I walked in, he was like, oh yeah, I just put the code up, and I looked back, and I was like, well, that's not right. So, I went back to try to figure out, like, why my code looked so different. It's because he put up the 5:30 event code. So, you know, I just went and changed it and everything, made my announcement, only 1 player from each team enroll, yada, yada, yada. And, one of my players was on it. You know, didn't want to be the one holding us up because they forgot to put in the code, and as soon as the code went up, wow, that is a really ugly color in a car. I'm sorry, but it is. Ooh. I hope it makes you happy though. Like, it's a very bold color to be on a car. It just does not appeal to me personally. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, I was, make my announcements and everything, and this player, he was on it, he saw a code go up, he put the code in, he was like, what happens if we put in the code for the wrong event? And I'm like, well, shit, I don't know. So I tried adding him to the event and then dropping him, which of course just dropped him back to the lobby. And it would be nice if I could drop him out of the lobby because he wasn't playing in the second event. It also caused some hiccups for his app because I was like, okay, well, looks like I'm just going to make a note of it, and when we do the later event, I won't add you, as registered. And, but it did cause some hiccups, and we ended up having to enroll his partner from the Two-Headed Giant event, or in the Two-Headed Giant event, because, his phone couldn't handle being in two event lobbies at the same time. It was kind of a mess. So, would be nice if I could drop players out of the lobby. But again, that's going to be a pretty rare occurrence that comes up. At least, at an LGS. This is one of those things that with bigger tournaments, I could see this becoming more of a problem. If you're using EventLink for a bunch of side events and everything, and you wrong event gets the wrong code. But then again, if you name them generically enough, it kind of doesn't matter. You're like, oh, these got swapped, fine, whatever, that's now this event. So, I don't know. Would be nice, but I don't think it's really a showstopper thing. They gave us a checkbox in the active round. You can now filter to only display unreported matches, which is great. Really is helpful when you're winding down the round. There's 10 minutes left on the clock. You got 2 matches still going, and you can then go and check and say, oh, I have 2 matches still going and 5 not reported, and start kind of sussing out where the other 3 are and why haven't they reported, and do they need you to report? Because a lot of time there does not seem to be a lot of communication on who is entering the results, right? Some players, at the end, they put it in they're I am a results entering person, whether I win or lose. So they put in the results, they turn their phone around, show you what we're about to submit, they hit submit, you get your confirmation, okay, cool. Others, I've seen, they enter if they win, and that used to kind of be how it was, that was kind of the unspoken thing with the match slips, right? Whoever won took the match slip up, because it's unlikely that a player is going to forge a match slip for a match that they won, now saying that they lost, right? I think that's kind of the rationale behind it. The player who won the match has the most interest in that match slip not getting altered from the point at which everybody walks away from the table. So, and everybody's getting used to this new system, to doing this. So, we're still getting there. We still have players that have to be reminded a few times to put in the code, to join the event and everything. We're learning. Let's see here. What else is there? I know there's been other, small improvements that I probably haven't even noticed. Because, whatever they improved on was never something that stuck out as an issue to me. They seem to have fixed the persistence issue where the computer in the back wasn't staying logged in. Now, my login on my phone is still kind of shaky, but that makes complete sense. I think it's one of two things causing it. Either A, the first account to log in and access the event is prioritized, which it should be, to preserve the login there. Or, it's just that, like, I say I close my browser. I go back to my home screen. I don't, like, force quit out of it. But I, like, go back to my home screen and, lock my phone, put it in my pocket, and then just after a while, the phone breaks connection on the browser to, like, preserve data and everything. Either way, that's not a big deal. I don't care about that. That does not bug me at all. Because, again, it just makes complete sense. But the computer in the back staying logged in is important because that's what's displaying our timer and everything. So, I'm glad to see that fixed. We're still seeing a handful of app issues each event. There's only so much you can expect them to do with that, though. Just because different manufacturers, different phones, even, like, especially with the Android OS. iOS, you don't have to deal with it because they control everything about it. You can't get a Motorola device with iOS on it. But Android, each, like, major company alters, like, they kind of customize the OS. Like, I used the Samsung Galaxy line for a couple years, and over the quarantine time, I got an email that's like, Google Pixel, like, $300 off, and it was getting to be time to replace my phone. And I don't like this lease your phone shit from my mobile carrier. It doesn't sit right with me. I'm not saying, like, we need to do away with it. I do miss, like, okay, you renew your contract for 2 years, and here are the selection of free devices you can get, or here are the deeply discounted. I do kind of miss that. But the like, making payments on your device does make it accessible for people who can't drop $600-700 in one shot to get, a nicer phone. I don't think they should really get to charge interest on it, but, whatever. Because, like, it doesn't make sense, right? You're doing it through your carrier. You're already paying them, like, way more money than it costs to provide your service. We all know that. You're making payment on the device, and if you terminate the account before the device is paid off, you still have to pay it off. Like, so I don't understand why there should be interest on it, like, why there needs to be for it to be sustainable for the company. I know why there's interest. I understand how capitalism works. I just think that's dumb. I also, like, I hate the narrative they sell where it's like, oh yeah, you get to upgrade your phone every year instead of every 2 years. If you give the device back in reasonable condition, they'll, like, waive the rest of your payments for it, and you can get, like, that's why I say it's like a lease your phone thing. Anyway, none of that matters. I'm sorry. I'm tired. Anyway. So, yeah, I got a Pixel, and, like, the experience on using the same mobile OS is very different between the two. And it's, to create a sense of kind of brand loyalty and lock you into this is how you know how to use it. And suddenly, you have this. You are, like, way out in the intersection, friend. Suddenly you have this completely different experience because you went to a different manufacturer. So, because of all these things combined is why I think there's always going to be some degree of app issue. Some of it from, just not being able to test on every single device, and the emulators do the best job they can, but there are a lot of things you won't see until it's on the actual device. And not to mention, you know, older phones, you know, that are more and more of their resources are taken up by OS, and, you know, they just don't have the power anymore. But they do seem to have gotten to be fewer. Most of the issues I've seen over the last couple weeks, if you force quit out of the app and reopen it, it fixes itself. So, all in all, like, I think you're always going to see that to some degree, but it has gotten better. So for the competitive event, this weekend we did a 1K at the shop. I was floor judge. MacGyver got to stretch his leg as head judge. And your first time head judging is really weird. Like, I remember thinking, I can't believe anybody gave me this much authority. Like, it seems like a bad idea. But must have gone okay. So, anyway, yeah, so we used EventLink. We ended up doing paper pairings and paper match slips because we had, you know, out of our 44 players, it was like 5 or 6 that didn't have the app, or that, you know, were having problems connecting to the event through the app. So, we decided to do both, which, you know, is an option. And that did seem to work out pretty well. It did create some confusion with the players that are using the app, like, oh, so I'm using the app and I need to fill out a match slip. And it's like, yeah, no, as long as your results get reported some way or another. But it seemed to be helpful for the players that don't use the app. We did get to log 1 penalty. And so on that, down towards the bottom of the left navigation menu of that bar, like where you see the rounds, you see the gavel. You click that and that takes you to the penalty screen. And just like in the Word, you can search up, you know, penalties that have already been recorded, or you click the new button to enter a new one. And you get a modal window that is much like the old screen in the Word for it. Like, you search for the player name, you just start typing, and it starts filtering the list of enrolled players so you can find the player you're looking for. Has the drop down to select what the nature of the penalty is. Well, you know, it has your drop down to select, like, what kind of penalty. This was a GRV, game rule violation. Then there's a second drop down that allows you to select, like, what level, because generally you get a warning. Those can be downgraded to a caution. I generally don't like doing that. Like, because the thing of it is, the warning doesn't really do anything except for sit there until you accrue too many of them. So, I don't know. When you have a player that's like, oh, can you please downgrade it to a caution, that's always kind of sus to me. Because it's like, why? Planning on doing this again, are you? I gotta pause y'all real quick. Yeah, so I don't know. I can't think of a benevolent reason why you would want your warning to be downgraded to a caution.
I'm sure somebody out there does know, and if you want to tell me, you go ahead. You can always email me, lastpointgaming@gmail.com, LASTPOINTGAMING. No separators or anything, just type it like your space bar is broken, @gmail.com. You can always hit me up on Twitter @Sparrow, and that's SPAYRROE. Anyway, so yeah, you can select what level it is, and including like when the stuff upgrades to a game loss or a match loss, and put in notes. So I like to put in kind of detailed notes about what happened. So if there is a question later, now the person that I issued the penalty, I believe, called a judge on himself. It was a minor error. He's a good player. He's one of our regulars and everything. Good guy. So I don't think it was a concern with him, but it's just something I've gotten in the habit of doing when I used to do the IQs and everything. It's just in case a player would come back later, especially when I'm not the head judge. If they come back to the head judge when they're accruing, their penalty that upgrades them to a game loss, and they're like, whoa, wait a minute, I thought I only had one other of this, or, I didn't know I had another warning. What's this about? There's detailed notes to refresh their memory, I guess. But yeah, the penalties system was real easy to use. And yeah, you can mark the event cut to top 8. I think you can do it after the event starts too. Like I think if you start playing Swiss rounds, you can later check the box to cut to top 8. But I don't know, because we don't usually do that. But yeah, it was pretty easy to use. I don't think we ran into... Oh, that is one thing I would like to see them add. And maybe it's like selecting what rules enforcement level, or something along those lines. So when you do a sealed tournament, you get a deck building phase where when you start the event, it starts in deck building. You can still enroll people in the event and, everything else. I gotta pause y'all again. What was it talking about? Oh. So, yes, you can collect deck lists and everything at round 1, but, it's kind of customary to have the quote-unquote player meeting at competitive REL events, where you make all your announcements and everything like that. It would be nice in EventLink if this was a kind of separate phase, just because even with, sorting added and everything, sometimes you end up with your player count in EventLink does not match what it should be based on your sign-up sheet. And the player meeting would be an excellent opportunity to determine who is not enrolled that needs to be. Oh my god, that's not kids' time. That is hot. Ow. Whew, I'm awake. Anyway, so yeah, the players' meeting would be an excellent opportunity to determine that. But that's not a big deal. It would be nice to have. There was another feature that I was like, would be a nice to have. I'll have to think about it. I'm sure it'll come back to me. Oh, delayed pairings push. One thing I would really, really like to see them add is after you pair, like, you create your standings for the round before, you create the next round. before it pushes the pairings out, like, pair the round, you get a chance to look at things, make sure people who are supposed to be dropped are dropped, etc. You know, all that kind of happy stuff. And have an opportunity to see this stuff before pairings get pushed out. And then, like, manually say, okay, we're good to push out pairings. It can be like a setting, because I'm sure there are people who don't want this feature. And maybe as we move through and get more used to using the system, there will be less glitches and issues, that this feature would be less and less relevant. But having to repair the round and send second pairings, because that seems to be one of the biggest kind of schisms in the app, is when a round has to get repaired. It doesn't seem to automatically update the screen you're on. Like, if pairings got pushed out, you hit your notification, now you're in that pairing. If a new pairing gets pushed out, it does not seem to automatically refresh, so that it's showing you your correct table number and opponent and everything, and has caused some issues. Now, we still don't have manual pairings, but there has only been one occurrence where I was like, okay, I kind of wish I had it. And we had this, something related to this. We had to repair a round, though I believe it was the round before we had to repair. And, you know, it's like round 3 of the night. And so one player sits in the wrong place. Either, like, his phone's not updating fast enough, or, you know, whatever causes him to think he's supposed to be at this other table. And then, you know, kind of the last player to wander back sees there's one empty seat and assumes that that's where he's supposed to be, goes and plays. Turns out we had 2 players mismatched. Now, technically, that's a game loss, being that it was discovered 20 minutes into the round, after the one player had played out his match. Because his opponent put in the results, turned his phone around, showed him, and he looked, and he was like, that is not my name. Uh-oh. So it would technically be a match loss for both of them, being that they did not show up to their match. They showed up to the wrong match. This is not a thing I want to do at F&M, right? It seems pretty harsh, but there was really no other fix for it. Like, we can't, like, just manually change the pairing, so we can't do anything about it. But that, like, we've had one occurrence of that, and then, of course, you know, made the announcement to please please verify your pairing. Even if you're the last person, verify that that's the table you're supposed to be at, so that should we have an issue like this in the future, we can discover it in the first couple minutes of the round and get everybody resituated and get everything fixed up. But all in all, no, EventLink has come a very long way in a very short time. I'm pretty impressed with how they've been with addressing comments and critiques. I should probably really start submitting by suggestions through official channels instead of, you know, just yelling into the void. But no, I'm impressed how far it's come in such a short amount of time. In some ways, I do feel like the initial iteration, like the first time we ran with it, some of the stuff that was missing or off really should have been accounted for in the development process and testing. And I'm not throwing shade at their devs or their testers, because a lot of it comes down to one, people way above that station determining what goes in and what doesn't. And two, if you have an adequate team to do the development in the timeline they want and to do the testing. Like, you can only get so many lines of code from a dev. A tester can only test so many scenarios. So if you don't have the resources you need, that's just how it is. And one of the big places a lot of large corporations tend to shave budget is in QA. Oh, we'll just have the developers test. Well, yeah, duh. Of course developers unit test their code. Doesn't mean that I'm going to know every entry point, right? Doesn't mean that I'm going to know every scenario. I'm going to test for the scenario that got me to the segment I'm working on. I'm going to test the scenario that was basically given in my task or my bug. It's like, hey, this weird thing happens. Here's how you make it happen. So yeah, of course, if I checked it in, I thought the code was good. And it's really a shame. Like, I've seen a lot of companies I liked turn into companies I hate, and it seems like it's because their product, service, or whatever that's hitting the market, like, by the time it gets to me, is not the same quality it used to be, and it's probably due to lack of QA, unless it's a product, and then it's due to changing materials to save as much as you can. Anyway, so no, I'm not throwing shade at any of their team or anything. There are things that I feel like, this really shouldn't have been in production, but I don't know how they got there. Like, and in this capitalist wasteland we live in, I just generally assume it's because somebody decided they could save 5 cents by cutting this or that, which caused a gap to happen, which is how it got to production. I don't blame anybody working on it. But no, it's good. It is very decent. Okay. So that's all I think I have on EventLink. Like, this is all the updates I have from it. They fixed a couple quality of life things I really wanted. Last I knew, we still don't have the two-headed giant event type. Would be really nice to have, because it cuts down on the amount of announcements I have to make. But we don't really get enough two-headed giant players at our two-headed giant pre-releases because that's the other thing is, right, WPN status is determined by participation in pre-releases count for extra. So by only having half the players in the two-headed giant event enroll, we're losing half the player count. But our two-headed giant events are usually max out at about a dozen teams, so we're only losing maybe 20 players over the course of the weekend, which just isn't significant enough to, I think, affect the source WPN level. But it still would be nice to have. But yeah, I think that's all I have on EventLink. So we're gonna move over to talking a little more about the Judge Academy stuff. Okay, so JudgeCast did an episode where they had Nicolette from Judge Academy on as a guest, and apparently one of the judges for JudgeCast works for Judge Academy. I actually know the JudgeCast judge names, so we're going to call the one who works part-time for Judge Academy JA. We're going to call the other one L3, because they do specifically mention that they are an L3, and of course Nicolette. I want to preface this by saying I don't mean any disrespect to anybody here. I don't have much opinion on Nicolette. I do know like other judges I know hold her in very high regard. She's not somebody I really interacted with under the old judge program or anything like that. So, but I do know judges who hold her in very high regard, and I like the judges from JudgeCast. I think JudgeCast is a great podcast. I don't listen to every episode. I mostly listen to the pre-release note, well, the release notes for the sets before pre-release episodes. But some of the content they go through is just incredibly dry, and they really try to make it engaging and entertaining, like as much as they possibly can. I think it's a very well done show, and I do have respect for the judges that run it. I am going to disagree with some things that they have said in this episode. It is episode number 265 if you want to look for it. But I don't want it to seem like I'm attacking any of these people. I think they're all fine people. I just disagree with some things. Now, let's start with the good. So, Nicolette was talking about how they're working on implementing in-application communication through Judge Academy. Like, basically messaging between judges, so that, you know, judges that worked on an event together or attended a conference together or whatever have a way to communicate that does not require giving personal information for either of them. Like, Judge Academy does not have to release an email address, or, you know, you don't have to take this person, like, as a friend on your Facebook or whatever. And I think that is great. And I think that would be a very big boon for the judges. I'm very excited about that feature. She also talked about adding, like, kind of skill endorsements, almost if you're familiar with LinkedIn. Where, like, on my LinkedIn, you know, I've added skills for, like, JavaScript and CSS and jQuery and less, and, like, just all these things that I work with, and my contacts can go in and say, oh yeah, I've worked with her, I've seen her jQuery skills, and they're great, so I'm going to endorse her in that skill. I'm going to say, I, as, you know, somebody who has experience with her, can verify that, yes, she has that skill. And I think that will be helpful for getting judges staff. This is one of my biggest problems with Judge Academy, is suddenly we're paying for the privilege of being able to essentially volunteer. So I'm sorry. Just events generally do not pay enough. You know, nobody's making a living off of this. Now, local events are a little bit different. Like I said before when I've talked about this, Boss takes really good care of us at the Guild. But I mean, for doing larger events, like, you know, doing SCG events, especially when you calculate in travel costs, which, if my firm was like, hey, we need you to go to Texas, or we need you to go to King of Prussia to work on site with a client, they would pay my travel expenses. They would not. It wouldn't be expected of me to cover my expenses to go do my work there unless I mean, okay, I guess it is kind of similar. Like, if I apply to work for a job in Philadelphia and they hire me, they're not going to pay my commuting expenses because that's, like, my office. But judging is a little bit different, right? I think we can agree there that there's a certain amount of travel required unless you happen to live in one of the larger cities where these tournaments come. So, that you're, like, not reimbursed for mileage or anything else like that, you have to kind of deduct that from your judge pay. And when you consider that, like, sure, $125 for a day sounds like a good amount until you start factoring in your mileage, your travel time, the fact that they apparently expected an 11-hour day. Alright, maybe not 11 hours. Maybe that's a little excessive. No, it was definitely over 12 hours by the time that main event wrapped up. Once you start factoring in all the costs associated with you getting there, this is a kind of a problem. So, and okay, I get it. You know, we're supposed to feel like some love for our community or some shit, and that's why we do these things, right? Fine. When it was a kind of free program, fine. But now I'm expected to pay for the privilege of all but volunteering my time. You know, that, and Judge Academy didn't seem to be doing much to actually help judges in a way, like in a notable way, doing something other than what Judge Program did. And sure, okay, there are all these training modules, which I will say does make it easier for mentoring candidates. Because instead of compiling the list of resources and sending that to them, like, okay, so you can go to Enlightened Tutor, and that has all kinds of, like, instruction kind of thing, and, like, almost like modules to work through. There was this neat kind of game that used to be on the old Judge Program site through Judge Apps. Also, another big thing is everybody being able to go create a Judge Academy account. Before, you used to have to get into the Judge Apps side of things, and somebody needed to approve your account. Not just anybody could go create a Judge Apps account. And it makes sense because it does give you access to data. You know, like, you can search for judges and everything. Which was problematic in some way because everybody on Judge Apps you could find if you had a Judge Apps account. Whereas on Judge Academy, you can mark your account as private, that it doesn't come up in searches, and that somebody has to have, like, a direct link to find you. And sometimes getting that approval to join Judge Apps was a little delayed. So these are benefits, sure. But as far as the, like, instruction modules, they are not interactive. And so it's sitting, listening to a video lecture, basically. And I don't care how engaging you try to make that content, a lot of this content is incredibly dry. So to do it in a way that is not interactive, it's hard to do these things. Like, I'm thinking about going for my L2 just so I can give the recommendations to L1 candidates I mentor, not so I get credit or whatever. It's not about that. It's just, you know, somebody comes into the shop and they're like, hey, I'm interested in becoming a judge, because there's a shop, like, closer to where I live, but they don't have a judge, so I'd like to become a judge and run there. Cool. Yeah, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to work with you and everything. And then the problem comes to me when they're like, okay, I'm ready to take my test. I'm like, cool. Now I got to get you in contact with an L2. And yeah, my opinion of the person has some weight, but the local L2s I've been working with, they still want an opportunity to talk to this person and kind of vet them. And I 100% approve of that. The last thing I want to see from this is just a pool where you go and say, hey, I need my L2 recommendation, and somebody pencil whips you without having any idea who you are or what your intent is, or, like, without going through that kind of due diligence process. Now, before, you basically had to have an L2 willing to sign off on you because they had to proctor your test. So if they weren't willing to sign off on you, they would just decline to proctor your test. Whereas now you take your test online and everything, so there's, like, less connection there. But I do think we still need the kind of, somebody needs to sign off. And whether you devote that to giving L1s the ability to sign off on candidates they mentor or what, you know, that's something up for discussion. But there are rules dealing with unsporting conduct. And I don't want to see somebody pushed out of the game because they wander into an LGS, have somebody that is like certified as a judge, you can verify that they're certified as a judge, and that person is feeding a toxic environment, and have this person go, oh, great, so even with judges, like, I'm not safe, this is all just PR, that it, like, judges help ensure player, safety and comfort and everything, because of this horrible experience. So that's why I think there does still need to be some kind of recommendation vetting, some kind of system in place for saying, like, yeah, they are upholding all of the rules of the game, not just, not just cart rulings, right? But it can be tough for the L2s, and I get that, because all of us got day jobs, right? We all have our main source of income, and they're just like, I'm fitting in events and stuff around the demands of my life. They're fitting in, events they're judging around their life, and also having to fit in going through these recommendations and everything. So, yeah, I'm thinking about going to get my L2, but then I gotta start the training modules on it, and I just really don't look forward to that. They're pretty bad. Like, I'm sorry, but they are. And the thing is, like, I literally have to go through them before I can even take my test. That's something that would be really nice to see. If you could just take the quiz for the module. Just take the quiz, and if you pass it, if you've demonstrated that you have the knowledge, you don't have to go sit through the video and scroll through the transcript, and, like, you don't have to do these portions. Anyway, I digress a little bit here. So, yeah, I think skill endorsements is a good idea. Anybody can go leave a, like, positive review, well, any kind of review on a judge, positive or negative. I have to update my pinned tweet with, like, where to contact through Judge Academy if you see judge misconduct. I don't know where you would report player misconduct now. Like, do we have a banned players list anymore? Are suspensions and bans a thing I don't know. I don't know. But so you can already go leave reviews on other judges, and that's great. But I think having something that, like, kind of appears on the profile, so when this judge is applying to work events and they have, like, 10 skill endorsements saying that, yeah, they're great with IPG policy. Cool. And they're looking to work, in main event somewhere. Because a lot of getting staffed at events is networking. Well, actually, maybe not so much anymore. I think they may be a little desperate, like, and willing to kind of take anybody that applies. Because I just don't think there's enough judges willing to do it. Because I know, like, there have been a few events that I've gotten contact from event coordinators being like, hey, you know how you did that one event one time? Do you want to come do this event? And I'm like, no, I don't. I like to judge at the guild. I like to help them out with their events. Not only is it more lucrative for me, and it is, I don't know. When I did The SCG Philly did the side events there. All my players were great. Like, I don't want it to come across that, like, I had negative interaction with the player and I didn't feel like I had support from the judge team. No, it wasn't even an issue, but it was a constant source of anxiety. Whereas, you know, I've been hanging around the guild for 20 years. I have a sense of security there that until it is challenged and goes unanswered, I'm not afraid to tell a player, like, hey, you need to, you know, you get yourself in line there. I don't have a fear that if I would have to DQ somebody and be like, get out, that the staff at the shop and, you know, other judges if it's a multi-judge event, and even my even my players, like, just wouldn't support me, and, you know, if that person decided to get uppity or whatever, that I wouldn't have backing. Yeah, it just wasn't a good experience for me. I did, like I said before, I did a whole episode on that. And your results may vary. I do have an anxiety disorder, so I get that. But yeah, I want to see them more standardizing judge pay. Like, this is the expected amount for an L1 for this kind of event. Instead of always, like, judges still have to do pretty much all their own legwork. Judges still have to put out their event applications and contact event coordinators. Judge Academy is not doing anything to facilitate, especially newer judges that aren't as well networked, getting staff to events that they want to work. Judge Academy is not doing anything to improve judge pay conditions and improve judge working conditions, like setting standards and saying, you know, this, when you have a judge on staff, this is the minimum required, like that they are paid X amount of dollars, that, you know, they are only working Y hours, you know, that they are entitled to these breaks. Like, there's just none of that. We're still kind of at the mercy of the TOs, and it's still on you to make sure you verify pay before you agree to do an event, to make sure you verify conditions, and then if the tournament organizer does not uphold the conditions promised, you don't really have a lot of recourse. Like, that's actually something I would like to see added, is major tournament organizers kind of being listed in Judge Academy, and judges having the ability to rate what it was like working with that TO, so that people know more than just word of mouth, especially if it can be anonymous, because yeah, sure, that opens the door to misuse of, oh, I'm just going to review bomb this because I, you know, have a personal disagreement with somebody who works for this TO or whatever. But I mean, ultimately, if they say I can't be a judge anymore, okay, fine. Like, whatever. It's not a big deal to me. I'm not going to cry over it. So me speaking up about my experience working at SCG, or, you know, working at an SCG Open, I don't really have a concern that, you know, that's going to get to somebody who's going to be like, oh, she's blacklisted from working these events. I don't want to anyway, so no loss to me. But I can see, you know, somebody who it is a loss to them being afraid to speak up and say, you know, hey, there is a Judge Academy Discord that I've recently joined, and I actually, for the first time, like, responded to something, and I was responding unfavorably, and I was kind of concerned about it. I'm like, I don't want to get in a fight, I don't want to have an argument, but, and no, I will not generally discuss things that are discussed in the Judge Academy Discord, but this particular thing, going back to needing L2s to recommend, it's become kind of a bottleneck, because it seems there are some L2s, and I don't know who they are. I think my local L2s have been doing the best they can with the time they have available and trying to do a good job actually doing their due diligence with these candidates. But it seems that there are a lot of L2s under the Judge Academy system that aren't doing recommendations anymore. And one of the points brought up is at least somebody has voiced that they're not really doing recommendations anymore because they don't want to be doing it for a for-profit company. And it was brought up that, well, you used to do it for a for-profit company, you did it for WotC. I mean, technically, no, the judge program wasn't directly under WotC, but it was under a subsidiary of WotC, so by the letter of the law, technically no, but in the grand scheme, yes, it was under the same umbrella, so. And I brought up that, yeah, but I think the big difference there is they weren't paying for the privilege of volunteering their time. And then it started this discourse, and everybody was polite. I really expected that the one person who was very adamant on this thread and is clearly a very supportive of Judge Academy for whatever reason. I don't know if they work for Judge Academy. I have no idea who they are. Like, I just saw the same handle commenting. I don't even associate that handle to an actual person. As far as I don't know who's behind it. But they seem to be very supportive of Judge Academy, and I was expected to get kind of blasted over this, but no, the discourse was very good, especially for a more sensitive topic, right? I was really impressed with that, and has definitely kind of given me this feeling that I'm more likely to interact with this Discord, because despite being a voice of opposition, I was treated fairly and politely. Anyway, so, this person came back and was like, well, you can mentor candidates without giving a dime to Judge Academy. Okay, yeah, that's true. I've mentored a few candidates, and, I pay my dues or whatever, but I can't recommend them. And that was my question, and I clarified, hey, I'm not trying to be argumentative, but I need to clarify this point. Do you not require a paid L2 account through Judge Academy to do the recommendation? And it's okay, you do, but that's different than mentoring. Yeah, no, I'm aware of that, being that, again, I can't do recommendations, but hey, if somebody comes to me and they're like, so I want to become a judge, I want to be the person for them that Murdoch was for me. Murdoch was the third L2 I discussed this with, and nothing against the other two. Again, everybody's got a lot of demands on their time, but I felt the other two, didn't see me as a serious candidate. It was oh, yeah, no, I've seen you play. I don't think you're there yet. Not saying it's because I'm a woman or anything. It's because I'm a mediocre Magic player, and I miss triggers, and or if it's just I just don't have the time to deal with this. It was difficult for me to find somebody that would work with me, and that I was actually able to progress through working towards my L1. So, I want to do that for people. And sure, if I didn't have a Judge Academy account, if I was yeah, I'm just not paying for this anymore, I would still do the same mentorship. I would still direct them to Judge Academy so that they can get their certification and everything. I'd still do what I do, because, it's just kind of who I am. But again, I don't want to see people who are registered L2s through Judge Academy just pencil whipping people through that they've never interacted with. Oh, look, here's a bunch of people waiting for recommendations. Even when I was actively admitting for the Facebook groups, we had certain criteria that people had to meet for us to approve join requests, especially for the Learning Center, because we tried to keep the riffraff out of that group and keep it, that group was only for new players and people who were willing to be considerate and respectful and help new players. We didn't want RTFC people in there. That's like, reading the card explains the card. Yeah, if you understand the vernacular of Magic and like how the language works in context of the game. Until you understand that point, reading the card doesn't explain shit. You're still not going to understand the difference between why Meddling Mage, having an as enters the battlefield ability doesn't cause a stack, but Thalia's Lieutenant having a when enters the battlefield ability does cause a stack. Like, until you understand these little nuances in the language, it doesn't matter how many times you read the card. You're not going to parse it as these things are significantly different when they are. Anyway, sorry. I get really fired up because every once in a while somebody makes it through that then has to be removed from that group. But yeah, we had criteria for vetting accounts for new players, or for new join requests. And just like, I didn't want to see that abandoned there and just, oh, hey, we have a bunch of join requests, okay, accept. I don't want to see that happening with Judge Academy, where it's like, oh, here's a bunch of L1 candidates looking for their L2 sign-off. So, there's 30 here. I'm just going to sign them all off. I've never talked to any of these people. Right? I don't want to see that. I want to see the due diligence happening. I want to see the interaction and the, like, at least making an attempt to, are you going to support enforcing all the rules of the game? Or are you a petty tyrant just looking to throw your weight around? So if you require the paid L2 account, like, yeah, no, I can get it. Where it's like, that was the other thing, that the L3 brought up on Judge Academy, how L1s get more out of the website than L3s get, so it's almost like the old stack dues, the 100, 200, and 400 should have been reversed. Like, L1 should have to pay the 400, and L3 should only pay 100 because they get less out of the site. But then you'd never get new L1s. Right? But then, just a short while down the road in that conversation, they're talking about the amount of hours that goes into advancing an L2 to an L3. Apparently, it's kind of like getting your doctorate. Like, there's a whole panel. You gotta have some magic thesis. Okay, I made up that second part. I don't know, maybe you do. I have zero aspirations of ever being an L3. I can't think of anything that level, like, grants me access to that, like, I wouldn't have it in an L2. Like, I wouldn't even be bothering with L2, except I want to be able to endorse these candidates that I work with. So I don't have to pass them off to somebody else and, kind of push that burden onto somebody else. I worked with them, I mentored them, and if I worked with them and mentored them, I feel like, I would know at that point definitively whether I wanted to endorse them or not, and be able to explain to them if there's a reason that I don't want to give them an endorsement, like something I think they still, like some bit that they're missing. But yeah, there's nothing about being an L3 that I'm like, oh yeah, that would be something I'm interested in doing. I'm not interested in running conferences. I'm not interested in doing things at that higher level. So yeah, I don't know what that whole process is, but Nicolette came out and said that when they ran the numbers, it was determined that the average cost of advancing an L2 to an L3 was $750 US. So there you go. That is why L3 dues were more. But you know what? Fine. Just knock us all back to the $100 level and give us our damn promos. That's what's really rubbing me the wrong way. Is that was like kind of the bait. Like, hey, under the old program, like you had to get Exemplar, and that was a pain because the L2s weren't using their recommendations and yada yada yada. Whereas now you get promos twice a year. Like, you just get them. Okay, great. now we decided we can't do that anymore. Like, I don't know. That's just a little confusing to me. And I'm sure it's on the conference organizers now to distribute the promos to the attendees. So especially for these online conferences, it's the conference organizer that's getting the box of promos and being like, there you go, good luck. And that's being passed on to them now. Like, you want us to do these conferences, but from what I understand, Judge Academy isn't actually facilitating these in any way. They're not providing content. They're not providing presenters. They're not, providing logistic support. Like, they're not. So, again, we're in the same position we were under the old Judge program, except now we have to pay for it. And we just don't seem to be getting any more support than we were before. So I'm still not a fan of this. Nicolette did mention that they're hiring, like, people with PhDs and behavioral science and crap. If you want to know what it's like for a marginalized person in the community, talk to people in that group. If you want to know what it's like for, black judges and black players in the community, go talk to them. If you want to know what it's like for women in the community, go talk to them. For trans folks, for, other LGBTQIA plus folks, talk to them. Don't listen to somebody who sat in a classroom and is like, well, I, a cishet white man, am now an expert on all these things. No, you're not. So I'm not sure, and I may be wrong there. Maybe we'll see great improvements come from that. I would like to see them institute some kind of recognition system. That was something that came up in this discussion. That, there is no exemplar program anymore. So there's no, I want to recognize you for doing a really good job. So, yeah, that's something I'd like to see. So, yeah, I'm going to keep an eye on it. I'm sure this won't be the last time we discuss this. Or, yes, we're not really discussing. I'm sure this won't be the last time I talk about this. I'm going to try to listen to the JudgeCast episode again, and, I'm going to desperately try to listen to it all in one go. It's like a 2.5-hour episode, and I listen to it in pieces. Because, yeah, my attention span just can't do that, but we're going to try. So I can see, what more information I can pick out of this. Again, I will not regularly discuss things that are discussed in the Discord, because I feel like unless it's problematic, oh, yeah, that Discord's toxic AF, which it's not. Like I said, I was presenting a detracting opinion, and I was, ready for it. But everybody was respectful, polite. It was a good experience. So yeah, I don't think Judge Academy is all bad. I'm just still not seeing what's worth the amount of money. And for me, it's not a big deal. $75, $100 a year, it's not a big deal. The fact that an L2 membership would have been $200 a year before was not, a hindrance that I was like, oh, well, I'm not going to go for my L2. I'm probably going to talk about going for my L2 for at least 6 more months before I actually go through any of the modules. This is not a big expense to me, but for some people it is. And when they're not getting any value out of it, but, they just want to help out at the LGS they play at, it kind of sucks, So, yeah, that's where I'm at on it. Hey, I am still willing to put in the reps developing a web application if somebody wants to start an underground. We're not the fancy Judge Academy certification, but we can offer a certification saying that the rules and policies of Magic the Gathering, if somebody will make the content for it. But yeah, that's all I got this week. I really got to get in and get logged in for work. So, as always, if you made it this far with me, thank you very much for listening, and hopefully I'll talk to y'all again next week.